Hey everyone, welcome to Judging for the Win. I'm Dave, and this is my daily rule. Today's question comes to us from the True Stories collection, as in, it actually happened, an event I was actually judging. I'll go ahead and just tell you the question exactly as it was relayed to me. Hey Dave, can you make sure that we have all the deck lists for this event? Now obviously this is not a rules or a policy or even philosophy-based question like you see on my channel normally, but it is very representative of the sort of thing that you might be asked to do if you judge at a normal large-scale Magic event such as MagicCon Atlanta last week. And I thought it might be interesting to go over what sort of considerations go into a logistical question like this. Ready? Let's get started. So first up, let's just take a few seconds to make sure everyone's on the same page about what's being asked of me, which, by the way, is a great habit to get into if you're a judge who's new to working at large-scale Magic events with judge teams. A deck list is exactly what it sounds like. At serious Magic tournaments, you have to make a list of every card that you're playing in your main deck and sideboard, and turn this list in at the start of the event. It's against the rules to change what cards you're playing in the middle of a tournament or to use sideboard cards during the first game of a match, and deck lists are how we can prove that that's what's going on if it ever does happen. So my task was to make sure that everybody in the tournament has actually submitted one of these. For decades, players had to fill out a deck list on a paper form. The first major logistical challenge of the Deck Checks team was physically collecting all these forms and organizing them such that it was possible to quickly find each individual player's list. Except at very large events with hundreds of players, confirming everyone had turned one in was as simple as counting the lists after the player meeting and confirming this number against the number of registered players. There were almost always the same, meaning that further investigation was rarely necessary, but it was still considered a best practice to perform this step because of the high-stakes nature of omissions. As a matter of historical interest, I'll mention that at one time in Magic's history, the Deck Checks team was also tasked with counting all of the cards on every deck list to make sure that no one had turned in a list with an illegal number of cards in the deck or sideboard. This is the reason why many judge-focused lookup apps, such as MTG Familiar, have a counter like this that can be used to help with this process. Eventually, the focus shifted away from this extremely undesirable and laborious task, with availability on the floor to answer players' calls being deemed a more valuable use of judges' time than combing through deck lists trying to catch what was almost always an honest mistake. Now, these days, many events have an option to submit your deck list electronically online, which simplifies the collection and organizing processes dramatically. Such systems usually also have a checker that automatically red flags or refuses submission of illegal deck lists, which can help prevent errors too. Now, you'd think that this would make checking that everybody had a deck list easier as well, but there's a catch. It's extremely unusual for everyone to fill out their deck lists online. There's almost always someone who turns in a paper list, either due to flaky convention center internet, or difficulty navigating the submission site, or forgetting their password that they need to log in, or already having a paper one printed out. There's lots of reasons leading up to the fact that a normal tournament will have about 90% of the deck lists available digitally and 10% paper. Because the deck lists are split up like this, there are a couple of complications that can come up when you are verifying that you have all of them, and luckily a lot of them came up for me in the situation I was in last week. Well, okay, I guess that wasn't really lucky for me at the time, but maybe lucky for you since it's a nice educational moment. Alright, so mission 1 is to get the list of players who are registered in the event, and the list of players who have submitted a deck list online, both of which you can get from your event's scorekeeper. You also need the physical deck lists, which might be in the custody of the Deck Checks team, but in this case, they were keeping those up at the front stage too. Now, obviously, there isn't going to be a list of all of the people who have turned in a deck list physically. We're going to have to make that one up as we go along. Mission 2 is comparing. If everything works out, the list that you have should form a simple addition problem. The list of people in the tournament should equal the list of people who submitted a deck list online plus the list of people who submitted physically. So I started out with crossing off every name on the full player list that I also found on the online submissions list. I like physically crossing off names because anecdotally I've found this is one of those tasks that's easier in theory than it is in practice. I don't know what it is, but unless I physically mark off the names, it's so easy to switch from checking names off the full player list to checking names off the online submission list, which is, of course, meaningless. And dodging that pitfall is not the only thing that can go wrong here. Because Companion doesn't yet have a method for submitting deck lists online, any event run through Companion, like mine was, will necessarily have deck lists submitted via a different platform. Among other things, this means that the players' names won't necessarily be the same between these two platforms. A lot of the time, this will be fairly obvious. For example, maybe a player might be registered as William Jones for one service and Will Jones for the other. It wouldn't be too hard to identify these as being the same player when going down the list. On the other hand, if that same player is registered as Bill Jones or Liam Jones, that would require a little bit more figuring out because the player list from Companion is sorted alphabetically by the player's first name, meaning that these nicknames would appear in a completely different part of the other list. Now, another issue is that maybe something can come up where a player with a common name could have the exact same name as another player on the list. Fortunately, all the times that this happened to me, both players had turned in their deck lists, so it didn't really matter, but that's certainly not a given. I'll talk a little bit more about how to solve issues like this a bit later when I cover what to do in Mission 3. After crossing out all of the names appearing on the online submissions list, it's time to do exactly the same thing with the deck lists that were physically submitted. All of the same things can go wrong here, but with the added wrinkle that the stack of deck lists isn't going to be in any particular order probably, and you would also have to read the player names on the deck lists, which can be a little bit of an extra challenge depending on how good their handwriting is. Actually, there is one additional wrinkle that I came upon. 2 of the physical deck lists were submitted anonymously. Now, I knew at this point that I was going to be making a video about this because that's an extremely unlucky thing to have happen. As much fun as it is to meme on people for forgetting to write the names on their deck lists, it's generally pretty rare. 2 in one event absolutely blew my mind, and I started working out what I would need to do in order to come up with a resolution. The first thing that I did was check the deck designer blank, which is where a lot of people will write their name, especially when they don't see the spot on the left-hand edge of the paper where it's actually supposed to go. Honestly, if I worked at Wizards, getting rid of the deck designer box is among the first things that I would change. It's mainly there for historical reasons, but it's a lot less necessary today since deck designers can get credited a lot easier due to the internet existing. If anybody's wondering why the line for the player's name is on the side instead of at the top, it makes things a lot easier for seeing the player's name at a glance when thumbing through lots of these, although that's not as important as it once was, given that most people are submitting their deck lists online these days. So I think a full redesign of this form might not be a bad idea. Alright, anyway, after going through all of the deck lists, I circled the problematic names on the master players list. There were 3, the 2 anonymous deck lists, and 1 person who was not on the list of deck lists submitted online and also had not submitted a physical one. Mission 3 was resolving these cases. One of the 3 names that I had circled did not turn in a deck list for this event, and the other 2 had, but had not written their names on them. In order to figure out which was which, I would have to do an investigation. So I went to the pairings board and I found the tables that the 3 players were playing at. And in a lot of events these days, there are no paper pairings to reference because seed assignments are handled solely through the Companion app. In cases like this, you can get that same information from the event's scorekeeper. In larger events, though, it is becoming the norm that there would at least be one set of paper pairings available because of the chances for 1 or more players having difficulty getting their seed assignments from the app grows as the player cap gets higher. Next step is to conduct some interviews. My plan was to talk to each of the players and ask them by what means they had submitted a deck list for this event. Fortunately, the 2 paper submissions were substantially different archetypes, such that it would be pretty easy to identify which was which from just asking the players about what they were running that day. When I looked at the pairings board, I saw something very exciting. Only 2 of the names were there. This is a good sign because sometimes what will happen is that a person will register for an event and just not show up for it. Car trouble, another event running long, change their mind about playing, etc. There are a lot of potential reasons, but if that's what happened, that puts things pretty neatly into place, since a lot of people don't bother submitting a deck list in cases like that. I just needed to confirm that by talking to the other 2 players. Only problem is that neither of them was at their assigned table by the time I show up. This wasn't a surprise since it was a little over halfway through the round timer when I got to this point. It's likely that they both just finished with their matches. It's impractical to try and find them in the convention hall, so I focus on floor coverage during the rest of the round. At the start of the next round, I confirm which of the lists is owned by one of the anonymous decklist players, and when I look for the other one, that player's not on the pairings list. Now, the only reason why a player would be on the pairings list one round and not the next round is that they're no longer in the event. He probably dropped, but I guess it is possible that he got disqualified somehow. In any case, my job is done. All of the players still playing in the event are confirmed to have a deck list, and I reported as much to my team lead and to the head judge. I suppose for completeness, I should talk a little bit about what would happen if I got surprised and found a player who was actually in the event and didn't have a deck list. If we can confirm that a player did not turn a deck list in before the start of the event, like maybe they tried to but the online app didn't take it, or they filled one out but forgot to physically turn it in, or maybe they just needed extra time to finish it before the start of round 1, that would fall under tardiness, and the penalty would normally be a game loss. Depending on the circumstances and the reason why the player did not turn it in, the head judge might choose to downgrade this to just a warning. In the case where the judge thinks the player probably did turn a deck list in and the deck checks team just lost track of it somehow, well, I'm not sure how this could happen because judges are great and we never make mistakes. But anyway, in a case like that, there wouldn't be any penalty assigned, but we still do need a deck list for that player. Somewhat ironically, the best way to go about doing that would be to deck check that player. During that time, you could sort the player's deck out and take a photo of it on your phone, and then transcribe that onto a deck list at some time later after you get the players playing again. To close out, I'd like to draw attention to a couple of points from today's story. First off, I think the reason you don't see a lot of content like this on my channel or other resources devoted to judges is because, well, there isn't a simple right answer. When I got put in this scenario, I didn't crack open the judge cookbook and follow a specific recipe to do this task. Quite the opposite. One reason I picked Inky the Octopus as the channel mascot is because Octopodes are known for being very flexible, highly intelligent, and excellent problem solvers. All fantastic traits for judges to have when they're in a situation where they need to figure something out. The actual stuff that I did in this scenario was less important than the way I did it and my reasoning behind it, something I hope came across during my narrative. My thought process was exactly as I described it here. I broke what I needed to do into steps, and then I focused on only 1 or 2 steps that I had right in front of me while I was working my way through them. That's the reason why I didn't say what mission 2 would be until after I finished mission 1. I hadn't decided on that myself yet until that point. Having my level of experience helps you come up with a game plan when stuff invariably goes off script, but that's not the only thing to do in that case. Judges can and should draw on each other's experiences in cases where something you're not sure how to handle comes up. So yeah, it's not easy to write content like this, but I'll do my best to work through some more of these if people like it. Certainly, I think this sort of thing is important to put out there, at least as important as a 35th video on how continuous effects work, for instance. But that's all I have for you today. How did you do? Join me again next time for another daily ruling. Until then, I hope you have a great day.